So, ladies and gentlemen, in interest of time, we're going to be skipping the introductions and we're going to be directly calling upon all our speakers on the stage in terms of the panel. Apologies on the same because we're trying to buy time for you all to speak. So with that, allow me an opportunity to call upon, of course, we have Dr. Narendra already with us as the moderator. Saugata Bhattacharya, ex-Chief Economist, Executive VP, Axis Bank, member of the Monetary Policy Committee of RBI. We also have Madan Sabnavis, the Chief Economist of Bank of Baroda. Dr. Shubhada M. Rao, founder of Quantico. Ashish Verma. No, I think these few of the members have changed, so allow me a moment. Ashish Verma, Associate Director, Senior Economist, CRISIL Limited. Rahul Agarwal, Senior Economist, ICRA. Let's give them a big, big round of applause as we welcome all of them. And with that, I'd like to leave it in the able hands of Dr. Narendra to take forward the curation of this conversation. We have, instead of 60 minutes, we have now around 35 minutes for the same. So over to you, Dr. Narendra, to take it forward.
Yeah. All ladies and gentlemen, we have a very good discussion on the economic aspect of our Vikasit Bharat. But due to the time constraint, because by 11 o'clock, Mr. Anant Narayan ji, who is the whole-time member, he is here. So we, of course, we can make some adjustment. And it is our fortunate, all of our various very called economists, great economists, they have been supporting our N-Cube endeavors for all along. And their discussion has been very meaningful and purposeful. So without wasting, the subject is, can the India become a role model for the world in the period of Vikasit Bharat? Of course, it's a very debatable point. I had a discussion with Dr. Shubhada M. Rao, because India has been always following others. But that turnaround from the following others, can it become a role model, if at least in the future? That is the discussion we are going to have. So what I will do now, first each one of them, at least 5 minutes, sir. This aspect of, and we heard just now from Dharmakir Joshi and all others, they are all covered limited aspect of that. But your own perceptive and experience, how are we likely to make? So we'll ask first Subhadra M. Rao only. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Narendra, and my good old friends sitting here on the dais. I did have a preliminary discussion yesterday or day before about whether India is a role model. I think that perhaps on a realistic note would be more an aspiration rather than the current state of affairs. While India has done exceptionally well in managing the economy post-COVID, but in a run-up to COVID, we did have 3 consecutive big events each fiscal year, starting with demonetization, followed by GST implementation, and the last one was the shadow banking crisis. So a run-up to COVID years, India did go through these critical disruptions, if I may say, some good, some not so good. But the fact is that the momentum of India's economic growth had begun to start showing some fatigue even before COVID struck us. But having said, I think post-COVID, the policymakers have been exceedingly responsible in not engaging in fiscal profligacy, maintaining their, I would say, prudent policy mix, thereby enabling India to regain some of its strength in terms of macroeconomic stability. Coming to the next few years, running into 2047, I think India has its task very well cut out, particularly at a time when the next 4 years, if not more, are going to be globally turbulent. Post-COVID, it's a new world. We have greater degree of protectionism. We have, exceptionalism coming in from US post-Trump re-election. The trade wars are likely to, set their momentum up again. In all this global very turbulent environment that is anticipated. If you heard yesterday Trump's address at Davos, it was almost instructing the central banks to cut rates, not just by the Fed, but the world over. The point I'm trying to make, because I have a lot of very enlightened fellow panelists, so I'll just make another two comments here. One is that India needs to get its game in place in terms of preserving its macroeconomic stability. And what do I mean by that? Getting a complete hold over inflation management. I think that's very important. And on elaborating that, I will leave my fellow friend who's an MPC member to speak more on that. But on fiscal consolidation, I think that's a good path to adhere to going forward. The reason I say is we are in an extremely profligate global order as far as financing is concerned, debt financing is concerned. You have US and China both excessively having indulged in debt financing, the growth, particularly post-COVID, and with proposed Trump's what do you say, measures to prop up US economy, the fiscal scenario, particularly in the US, may only worsen and not get better. So any turbulence which will permeate through financial markets needs to be handled very well by each of the economy across the globe, or in an interconnected world. And that is why I emphasize that macroeconomic stability preservation becomes very critical. Growth is very important, no doubt about it, but growth at cost of fiscal profligacy, no way. Growth, not keeping in mind what's happening on the ground as far as inflation is concerned, definitely not a preferred policy choice. So the policy makers have their task very well cut out, that while there is a leaning towards propping up growth, let's not forget that we are swimming in a very turbulent water. We have to be responsible, creating enablers, as Mr. Sinha also mentioned earlier, and D.K. Joshi also implied earlier, that reforms have to be initiated, which create more of a sustainable and responsible growth, and not a flash in the pan kind of, growth pumped up by high adrenaline. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shubhadar Rao. Yesterday, our Sandeep Parwal, he made a mention that the US economy, as you rightly mentioned, the debt level is going to have a big impact on the emerging economies also. So that it will have an impact on the currency also. All that aspect he was talking on the equity market. So actually, other than that also, there are low-income countries have a big debt hang. So we must not get into that. That's your point. Now, of course, our Saguta Bhattacharya Saab is the member of the Reserve Bank Monetary Policy. But he is more than that, very chief economist and our good friend. So, former, yes. So what Saab is, whether he will talk on the behalf of the committee or that is separate, as a personal view, now we are going to hear from him. Sir, she also talked about the, because USA has already started, so many have cut the interest rate, but here we have to be very careful about that. So on your overall view, how the Vikasit Bharat, our India's can become a role model. Yes.
So thank you very much, Mr. Narendra, for inviting me to talk with the distinguished audience. I'll be very brief. Not talking of interest rates. I want to hear from all of you on your views. So all of that. So look, India is in a relatively good position. Yeah? I mean, we have our demographics, everybody knows, although that's also a problem, as Mr. Sinha mentioned, so that's a problem. We have one of the best digital public infrastructures in the world. Our language diversity makes us an ideal country to train large language models, etc. We have a very strong startup ecosystem now. I mean, you can see the effects of this ecosystem, the startups that are now in space, in drones, in defense, etc. So all of that. But there is something missing. There is something missing which is preventing India from moving sustainably up from a 6.5% growth into the 7.5%. So that's something which is, and Shubhada also mentioned, and I'm sure all of us know. I don't want to say this very bluntly, but we are over-regulated. We are over-governed, we are over-regulated. Now, I mean, you know, the Economic Survey has talked about it, the Chief Economic Advisor has talked about it. So, I mean, this is not something that I'm springing afresh on you, but I need to flag this. We've all of us heard thousands of old, obsolete laws which were hindering. Those have been taken out, those have been removed, etc. So I'm sure that it's made some change, but it's not nothing more than marginal. So that's something which needs to be looked at. I mean, you know, the overarching regulatory infrastructure. Education and skilling is not throwing up the kind of innovation that we need in our economy. I mean, you know, there is a fair bit of innovation coming in, but not the deep innovation that we are seeing in other countries, Singapore, Israel, forget about all the US, the UK, etc. I mean, not seeing that kind of deep innovation. So that's another problem. India's patents, those have picked up, but it's still way below. I mean, on a per capita basis, it's minimal. Even the number of patents is far below that of the other more innovative countries. The other puzzle is, why is corporate R&D in India so low? Yeah, so this is one presumption. Difficult to, look forward to more research on this. One presumption is that our economy remains too protected. So there is not that level of competition which is required for moving things in a competitive feature. I mean, I think this is, again, something that we are now beginning to hear from the Niti Aayog VC, from the Chief Economic Advisor, etc. Now we need to get integrated into the global trading, investment, other ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, the global value chains, etc., to induce the kind of competitiveness. I just want to, if you remember about 15 years back, some of our larger bus and truck manufacturers were producing substandard products. Then a large Swedish company came in, and then now we are beginning to produce fairly good buses and trucks. Yeah, so you need that competition to do this. Dwarf companies, again, the Economic Survey of 2018-19 flagged it, again in 21 Economic Survey, the companies are just not scaling up. And these small companies are just not competitive in the global space. Yeah. Chief Economic Advisor just a few days back talked about land issues, that India per capita land availability is the lowest in the G20 countries, and that is hampering manufacturing. We know that there is a problem with manufacturing. So these are some of these issues. Just want to stop these, just wanted to flag these issues, and would love to hear from all of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Correct. These are all, because generally these issues don't get the full attention. That's where we are not really utilizing the potential. So actually, some of the major upper area only we talk, then not at the macro level. So this is the real and the global level vis-a-vis India. How a few countries have gone in a speeder growth vis-a-vis this. And even most of the speakers said that 6.5 is not suffice actually. Some time back we had a 8.5 to 9 and 9.25. That may be different today to tell about that, because somebody also mentioned that you have grown very fast that time, and that was the reason some of the financial sector faced. Anyhow, hearing from our Chief Economist, Bank of Baroda, Madan Sabhanwais, because he is always very straightforward. ये हो सकता है तो होएगा, ये नहीं हो सकता है नहीं होएगा. Always, that is the correct methodology. So, in the overall theme, can the India little gear up to become a role model? Similarly, that IMF, from the middle economy, we have to get into the developed economy. इसका बारे में थोड़ा बात.
Okay, thanks a lot, Narendra ji, and good morning to everyone. You know, when we are talking of Viksit Bharat, what are we talking of? We are talking of a per capita income of around $14,000 per head. We are around 2,600, 2,700 now. So we're talking of what's going to happen after 23 years. So it's more of an aspiration, something which will probably happen. In a very, very cynical manner, I will say that even if I look at some countries like Lanka, which has a higher per capita income than India, at some point of time, they will also probably become a developed economy. Maybe faster than India, they have a smaller population. The important part is to look at this quality of growth, and I think that's something which Mr. Sinha had also spoken about, because we need to create an economy. If I'm going to be a role model, I'm supposed to say that, look, I'm a large population country, comparable probably only to China. So actually comparing India to Vietnam, Bangladesh doesn't really make sense. For the size of the Indian economy, we could be a kind of a model for countries. If we're able to establish that if we do A, B, C, D, we will be able to improve the quality of this particular growth. So statistically speaking, I think India is probably on a fair path. In fact, I think I'm quite optimistic that 7 to 8% growth is something which can come about in the Indian economy, because we have a lower base. When I talk of a lower base, when we are talking of a low base in agriculture, low base in industry, infrastructure. So as we keep investing more in these segments, we will definitely be able to accelerate, and I think we will be able to achieve these targets even probably before 2047. But the important thing is that A, are we creating the kind of jobs which are required? So if I have to be a role model to, say, a developing country and say that, look, you have to do these things to create jobs, the answer is, we have not been successful. We have created a lot of Swiggy delivery boys, but that's not the kind of employment which we require. We have a number of construction workers who are there. That's not the kind of economy I really want. If you look at RBI data, they still say that 40% of our employment is actually in agriculture. Okay, agriculture, logistics, but why are we not having it in manufacturing? And today when we're talking of things like AI, we're going to use less human beings. Going back to what Sagato was talking about, skills, do we have the kind of skills? So I think there are a number of these issues which have to be taken good care of. Now, I would personally say that this is a thing which happens over a period of time. Throwing the onus on the government is probably not right, because the government can do whatever it can through the policy framework. And in fact, I think this particular government has done very well on that particular front. Okay, there could have been a certain mishaps, I think what you mentioned in terms of demonetization. Yes, that was a mishap, but you keep experimenting with different things. Like in digitization, I think we have done very well post demonetization. So there are lots of policies which have been enabling the kind of growth we're seeing here. But the question is, it's the private sector which has to take the initiative everywhere. We need to be more open when it comes to farm laws, because I think that has pushed back agriculture. And I think the farm laws were superb, but then there is something called political economy. So it's going to take time before we're able to clear these hurdles. So I think this kind of Viksit Bharat is something which will statistically happen. Quality of growth is important, and I don't think we're in a position as of today to be a role model for anyone. So I can't say I'm an East Asian tiger model, which we had, the Japanese model, which we had. I don't think we have an Indian model right now. It's still work in progress.
Thank you, Madan Sarvanapalli. That, see, one, of course, maybe due to the COVID, our growth went very high, and average, suddenly अभी 5.4, 6.4. तो ये थोड़ा हमारा डैम्पनिंग हो गया सबका, ये इतना नहीं तो पहले हमारा पास्ट 5 व्हाट इज दैट साइज वाइज अभी 3 हो गई, इसका मतलब से ज़्यादा है हाउ वी आर इंक्रीजिंग द पर कैपिटा. सो फ्रॉम द योर परसेप्शन, यू आर ए यंग नाउ, so young, how can they aspire to achieve that growth? So, and on overall, because overall you heard 3 of them,
Yeah.
we cannot be a role model because there are so many things, and our Indian model will, yes, it will take time, but at the same time we need, I think when you inauguration you heard, we need some that type of big goal to make it Vikasit Bharat, because it is for the prosperity for all. So what are your views?
Right. So thank you very much, first of all, for having me here. And it is an honor and a privilege to be sharing the stage with some of our respected senior colleagues, whose work I really follow very closely. I think to answer this question, I think the 3 of them have already touched upon what are the kind of macro policies we need to have, what are the kind of constraints that are there. I'd like to go slightly off tangent here, maybe talk a little bit of historical evidences that we have seen. Madan did touch upon the Japanese model, and I would like to maybe touch a little deeper on that, because I believe one is that we need to appreciate that to be a role model, we need to be doing something which others can emulate and benefit from. And secondly, I think if we look at some of these experiences, we may find some cues for our own development agenda going ahead. So I think if we talk about Japan, for instance, I think it was a true pioneer in the sense it was the first non-American, non-European country to have a sustained industrialization and modern growth, and it became developed in a very short span of time post the World War II. And one of the major contributing factors of this success was something what they called as the Kiritsu model, where I think the whole lot of stakeholders in our supply chain, be it the manufacturers, the contractors, their subcontractors, everybody was being taken care of by a core company and a major bank. I think this is important because, and why I'm trying to highlight is that we have had such instances where we see that such kind of trust is missing in the present times if we talk in the Indian context. Now what this model really did was that this allowed the companies to pass on their not only skill sets, their R&D to each other, which allowed them to prosper and profit, and they passed on their prosperity in terms of the wages to the workers, and a kind of growth cycle sort of followed. So I think we need to have that kind of solidarity. I think we had CEA, Mr. Anant Nageshwaran recently, saying that in terms of the rule whereby the government is trying to make the time of the payment to the MSMEs to restrict it to 45 days. There has been a pushback from the larger corporates to sort of, get back on that rule. So I think in that context, I think some of these experiences do hold some sort of lessons for us. In terms of where India can be a role model, I think three things that come to my mind. One is people have already spoken about them. I think India's digital physical infrastructure is something which has been very notable. I think a lot of other low-income economies are adopting it, which don't have the wherewithal to start from the scratch. I think India's space program they have really made a lot of strides there. India's services exports and GCC exports, I think we don't have to mention a lot about them. They're pretty well known how India has been an exemplary player in these areas. I think one more thing where India can and should play a role model for other economies is in terms of how it adapts to the challenge of the climate, in terms of developing the adaptation and mitigation policies going ahead, because I think that is a very real and present danger that the world is facing. I think that is one area where India can show how we can grow and decarbonize at the same time. I think that's one area India needs to be a role model going ahead. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Adish. One area, Mr. Rahulji, that our manufacturing sector share in GDP, we are thinking 25%, it has come to 13%. And it was some time back 17%. And at the same time, that IMF has said, investments, innovation and technology. That will take, otherwise we will live in the trap. Second, we just mataya, government only doing the investment, private sector has been hesitant. Maybe due to lesser demand capacity, of course, nearly 70, I am not sure. So, in our vision, no, manufacturing, some people talk on manufacturing, some people talk on service. There have been a lot of debate and articles also. So, in our Vikasit Bharat, what should be our goal? Which area, which sector, and what are the new drivers?
So thank you, sir, for this opportunity. At the outset, let me just say that the kind of growth that we need to target to become a developed economy by 2047 is just very high at about 8 to 8.5%. And our estimate is that we would probably grow at about 6.5 to 7% in the medium term. So one of the key constraints in terms of this growth would be on account of exports, and which also feeds into the question on manufacturing. So if I look back at the last 10 to 15 years, India's share of merchandise, world merchandise exports is barely just 1.8% presently, and it was about 1.6% about 12, 13 years back. So the problem that we are facing is that there is a structural issue post 2010. The import intensity of global growth has come off quite sharply. For every 1 unit of global GDP growth between 2000 to 2010, their world imports were growing by almost 1.6, 1.8%, and now they are growing by sub 1%. So there is a demand issue, which is going to be a structural constraint in ramping up India's GDP growth to beyond 7%. And in fact, even in the past, the kind of outcomes that we had seen between 2003 to 2008, wherein growth was very high, exports were a key contributing factor. So in real terms, exports had grown by almost 15% during that period, year after year. So, And now, as some of the previous panelists, clearly highlighted that demand is an issue, and now we are sitting on fresh problems in terms of probably a trade war that we are looking at over the next 3 to 4 years. So that, again, how that pans out will also pose risks to exports and therein manufacturing. Now, what does this mean? I mean, this means that bulk of the heavy lifting of growth needs to be done by domestic consumption. And domestic consumption, the one thing that we need to fix for domestic consumption to grow rapidly, and even possibly make up for some loss of some of the poor momentum that we'll see on exports, is that we need jobs. And again, to just reiterate, very high quality jobs. So the structural transformation that India has missed in terms of moving people out of agriculture to the manufacturing sector, that has to take place to really ramp up manufacturing output. Now, if I just sum it up, basically we are looking at an extended period of sluggish exports and possibly healthy consumption demand domestically. What does this mean for private capex? Will corporates invest in capacity? So clearly there will be some demand deficit compared to the kinds that we had during the prime period where we had seen very high growth levels. So private capex will largely remain non-exuberant. You will see some activity happening, but not a very loud capex cycle, which is what we believe will constrain growth to 6.5 to 7%. And I think my final point would be, what role can government spending play in this scenario? So again, I mean, sticking to the fiscal consolidation path, we will be moving to reducing debt to GDP beyond FY26, which will mean that we will need to, we will not be able to ramp up government spending as a percent of GDP very significantly from where we are currently. In fact, we've been cutting down on that since 2021, which has led to fiscal consolidation. So there'll be some constraints in terms of how much government capex can also expand. So between FY21 and 24, we saw government capex grow by almost 30% year after year, which is also something that contributed to the ramp up in growth during that period. But that is not going to be the case.
Always. Yeah.
Yes.
It cannot be.
Yes, sir.
Now, sir, even IMF and all are talking that Indian context, there should be structural reforms. Then they say, of course, land, labor, all that. We talked also, somebody mentioned also, land availability per capita also. Aapne bataya hoga, I think. So, if this is already known, why we are not touching that? That question comes. So, on your own perception, what could be the such combined, what you call structure reforms at the central state government, and also to make what you call investment easy, because that is with all that our FDI this time is coming down and net FDI is very, very low. So then once if domestic investment is not there, it has to be supplemented by the international or the overseas. So place some points you can.
So again, I mean, this is not a simple issue, because if this was simple, this would have been done.
Yes.
Land in particular is a major structural problem. So the good point in this is that the current technologies that are developing, you don't really need that amount of land to set up 1 megawatt of electricity, 1 million ton of steel or cement or whatever. You can do this in a much, much more compressed space. The other part where capex, private sector capex is not growing, you just do not need that kind of capital investment that you need to do for producing 1 million tons more steel. Yeah, the costs of capex have remained the same over the last, due to technological advancements, etc. One point, because we haven't touched on that at all, is agriculture. Somebody, I mean, we do. Yeah, so I mean, there is a problem, there's a major problem, our productivity is low. I think now this is one of the key areas that we need to start moving. I think, again, there was a very nice editorial a few days back, that from MSPs we now need to move to minimum income support. So these price fixing mechanisms is really distorting the markets for agriculture. Yeah, so I mean, we are producing water intensive crops. We actually export water. Think about it. A water scarce country is exporting water. That's due to sugar. Sugarcane is one of the most export-intensive crop, and we are one of the largest exporters of sugar. So we are a water deficit country, is exporting water outside. So agriculture, so again, abolish the prices, abolish subsidies, let the markets function on their own, and then use that money that you save on subsidies, on subsidized electricity, subsidized water, subsidized whatever and things, to provide that income support which farmers actually need. Yeah, so that. There was a lovely article by Harish Damodaran, I think a couple of days back in the Indian Express on contract farming for potatoes. India is one of the largest exporters now for all these French fries, chips, etc. We used to be a major importer of all these, the chips and potatoes. Now, other than domestic consumption, we are now exporting with this company, he says, called Hi-Fun, based out of Ahmedabad. Yeah, so things like that, this is the kind of over-regulated things, the over-regulation that I was talking about. Regulation of prices, regulation of this control, that I think now needs to go. Clean, plain transfer of income. Let the farmers decide on what they want to produce, how they produce it, etc. So that is something, this is just illustrative of a much larger problem in the country.
Yes. Sir, actually, this last time when the growth rate came down, it is only agriculture saved us. And agriculture may, kabhi I think 4.8 or plus growth rate had come also. So there are a lot of technology, and another is climate resistant seeds. So good productivity seeds. So ये सब है, but still as आपने mentioned, it is not giving the required potential. But anyhow, we will.
Unfortunately, agriculture gets into the realm of political economy and a state subject. So that is the reason, if you just wonder why the farmers down south are not revolting. It's only the farmers up north are revolting. So it unfortunately has got hijacked by the political economy, a very, very crucial sector. And Shogato absolutely hit the nail on the head that focus area should be agriculture, make it more productive, make it more climate preserved, a lot of education. In classroom we used to read all about disguised unemployment. I think agriculture is the classic one.
Yeah, as you mentioned, by doing more rural-oriented industries and other things, the extra labor can be other than what you call allied activity also.
Exactly.
Because those during COVID who have gone there from the urban, they have not returned much. You have some point?
Yeah, I think one good thing, as you just touched upon, is the rising share of allied activities within agriculture. And I've seen the subnational statistics on this, and what we found is that across all the states, now the share of allied activities within agriculture, that is the non-crop, especially the livestock, has gone up. And if we think about two of the most agricultural states in India, which are, first is the Madhya Pradesh and second is Andhra Pradesh, they're totally different now. Where Andhra Pradesh has about 60% of its agri-GVA coming from the allied activities, whereas it is only about 23% in case of MP. So I think farmers do realize that, and they are trying to sort of move away from cropping activity, which is more vulnerable. So I think that is some sort of a positive thing happening in agriculture.
Non-farm incomes,
Yeah.
non-agri-related
Yeah.
incomes. I think my voice is
Yeah, now you contribute to that also, Madan.
No, actually, Narendra, I think you started off by talking about structural reforms, IMF saying.
Correct.
So I think the point which is missed is India has a demand side problem, and we always talk of supply side. Because supply side, I'm passing on the buck to somebody else. The government should do this, the government should do that. We've had the same kind of farm system which is there. We still clocked 8% growth. We never found anything wrong with it. The point goes back to saying that we have not created jobs. Government doesn't want to employ more people. Banks don't want to employ more people. IT sector is happily sending people home. So everybody is saying, I want my return on net worth to go up. I want the stock market price to go up, shareholder value to go up. So therefore, I don't want to employ people. You don't employ people, then you run into the same people that people have no money to spend. So today when companies like Levers and Nestle say nobody's buying my product, the thing is that people don't have income.
I have a point here, maybe slightly debatable, But I do have a very emphatic point, actually. I think there needs to be a policy debate on how much free is good for economy. And this is more gathering anecdotal evidence. We did a recent survey for a multilateral agency. And the point was that there was a fair number of people who did not want to get into jobs. It was हमको फ्री खाना मिल रहा है, हमको मनरेगा मिल रहा है, हमको ये मिल रहा है, वो मिल रहा है, cash transfers are happening. So while it is needed, I'm not even denying the importance of it, but there needs to be a debate on how much free is at a tipping point which disincentivizes people from getting back to jobs. And I think this is a very, very crucial debate. A time for it has come already because jobs are needed. Willingness to get back to the job market is something people actually talk of. We want labor, we want skilled labor, but people are just not willing to get back to jobs. Simple.
This is one
Shobhita,
area.
here, if you're looking at the kind of free money which is being given, honestly,
Yeah,
it's not,
give-
no, it's not adequate to keep anybody alive. See, look at the PM Kisan. You're giving 5,000 rupees per annum. 400 rupees a month, what am I going to do with it? You're talking of Nariga. On an average, a person gets 50 days. 250 rupees per day is what you're being paid. Is that something which can keep you sustained?
It
So
is at a policy level, that's not the desired objective. You don't want a sub potential income to be generated. But at the end of the day, it's a rural population which also needs to feel incentivized enough to get back to an active job, a high-paying job market. But unfortunately, too much of free has actually ended up being disincentive rather than incentive.
Yeah, sorry for
in my
that,
opinion.
Madam, that is it's debatable.
debate
वही
will
है.
carry on.
अभी most of the state and central government, no, maybe whatever required political compulsion, so many fees देते हैं. अभी महाराष्ट्र का भी इतना दिया है. वो तो जितना दिया तो, as you rightly said, for
Narendra ji,
minimum.
I take an objection to it.
Yeah.
You give a subsidy to industry, you don't call it a freebie. You give me a subsidy, you call it a freebie. This is not justice. Eh?
No, no.
You reduce the corporate tax rate in 2019.
I know.
No
Then
company
you are
has
supposed
invested.
to give
In
this.
fact, you should double the corporate tax rate for people who took the
I know.
benefit and
That
never
was
invested.
it didn't
So
yield-
this is a typical capitalist view where you say that when industry is given anything, it's great. They don't have to perform. Your profits go up, you pay dividend, your share price goes up. You give it to a poor person, you say, "Arey, that the bugger is not working, he's become lazy, we're creating a lazy country." I think there is a
Yeah,
contradiction.
but in this point I fully agree. उनको suddenly because to the internationally competitive हमने tax reduce किया था corporate. Middle income group को कोई ज़्यादा benefit नहीं है और ये actually exemption को भी withdraw करने वाले हैं नया scheme में.
See, the
तो
debate is
but
not
why
whether it
that
is
public
needed.
what is that I'm telling why that corporate
No,
investment
the
not
debate is not that whether it's needed. It is needed, no doubt. I'm not debating on that point, Madan, at all. The point I'm trying to make is there has to be a careful balance of that.
Right. Balance naturally. Now I
Here we're talking of don't give cash. Somebody is saying here that MSP should be withdrawn. We should not control the prices. And we have a large amount of poor people in the country. Forget about the fact that we say that we are moving up, that consumption data shows that people have gone up because I've given them freebies. I've given them cash, therefore they're spending more on non-food items.
of course if it is all
The
productively used,
so
it
I'm
will
saying
add to the growth.
the fact is that unless we create
And,
jobs,
when
only
the
then we
gap
can.
only these things are given. That is the correct. But yeah, sir, आपका-
One second.
Yes, sir.
Jobs are not going to happen. So, सीधा बात है, when I say as clean as that, all the lower level jobs are getting automated away.
Yeah.
Corporate hierarchies are getting squeezed. The middle segment is gone. Yeah, and the top segment is so much competition that it's from the top. So jobs, कुछ भी बोलो, jobs are not going to happen. And now with increasing this is a very, people talk about, when the cars came in, when the horse-drawn carriages came in, when electricity came in, this is a completely different, those were tools. This is an agent now that is coming.
Yeah, this is the major problem of India. That is because big issue. Because now if you want to go from the low income to middle income to and all our per capita, it can be only when everybody is engaged productively. And the productive savings, because अभी आपका banking का भी structural issue हो गया. Savings are not getting to the required level. So that is resulting in lower credit. Suddenly credit growth has moderated also. But I am asking this export service sector, because most of the these companies are with the heavy cash, but I don't think they are innovated much enough, research and development, and we are only giving that service as a backup to the bigger. But as I mentioned, technology, you should innovate and develop newer thing. The same old thing, we are changing that and providing, but not there has been a much, because if you want that service has to become a bigger share, which is already there, that has to give a little bigger contribution. So, आपका view क्या है?
So, see, typically services over the last maybe a shorter span of time have done quite well, and a part of that is also on account of GCCs. Now, the big risk is that a lot of that could be subject to AI and automation, and is that even sustainable going forward? We don't know. So this is still a sort of a black box in terms of how AI and automation will impact service sector jobs. And I think the impact on service sector jobs will be much larger than on the other sectors of these technologies. So this broadly, I think services in terms of exports may continue to outperform manufacturing, but we are looking at very significant risks on that aspect as well. Do advanced economies need to continue to outsource some of these services if they can just automate these services and shift them back home? So that is also one of the key problems.
Yeah, Madan, that America में अभी Trump आने के बाद, America first, and also he withdrew from the Paris Accord, and क्या अभी tariff का issue बहुत आया, तो India में sometime back we had started increasing the tariff also. So there is a bigger risk when we are talking these exports and all. So what do you feel that impact on Indian economy and all?
See, as of now, I think India has not been targeted specifically, but for kind of aspirations we have, we're talking of internationalization of the rupee, BRICS are trying to work with non-dollar. I think there is definitely a potential threat which is there, and I think as long as the threats of Donald Trump are there, I think there would be a tendency to be a lot of volatility in the market, starting of course with the currency market where we're seeing every day the rupee is moving in a different direction as the dollar changes course. And I think the same thing will also have an impact in terms of bond market yields, in terms of interest rates, because I think earlier we thought the Fed would be cutting rates 4 times a year, now it's going to be twice probably, but we don't know it will go back to 4. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the markets on account of Donald Trump coming to power. And knowing the way how whimsical he is, he could actually implement everything yes.
Coming to Adish ji, what could be the new drivers and new levers? One is digital, आपने बताया. उसका percentage कितना additional आ सकता है. Second, we are all talking women participation. Maybe there are so many other levers, because food processing sector का government ने initiate किया, but still not getting that investment. There can be so many such which is getting at the lower level of. Second, of course, हमारा education system where we can export human capital. There also, not to the extent we had the opportunity, we must not have used. So what are your views on?
See, I think it's, I think many of the things you have already touched upon. I think one good thing which we have, I think in all these, some of the challenging, things that we have spoken about is that, see, for many countries who are already advanced and aging, I think they can only grow by enhancing productivity. But as far as Indian economy is concerned, we still have a lot of appetite for infrastructure creation. I think so we still have, we can have growth by increasing the capital stock. Our labor force, as you have already touched upon, I think there's a lot of scope to improve the productivity of the labor. And on top of that, we also have a lot of innovation happening by way of India has a very, well-developed startup ecosystem, and we have seen a lot of innovation coming out of there. So I think productivity enhancement also is something which can add to our growth prospects. So I think, but I think other points remain very well what you have already touched upon. In terms of one thing which Rahul was talking about in goods versus services exports, I think services exports, what we have seen is that India has had a very good performance in terms of the services, software exports basically. And I think I don't see any problem there, that part continue to be growing. Because I think historically, if we see, we have never been, towards developing the hardware part, be it the Intel processing units or be it the Unix kind of platform, which was all given to us by the Western economies. What we developed on is providing the services using some of those hardwares. I think so that can still continue. And we have seen that, in fact, recently US had also put a limit on the GPU transfer to various emerging countries, including India. So I think we might not want to focus on developing the hardware part right now because there's a lot of, I think, challenges there. I think the US is trying to protect that. But we can still continue to use some of those technologies and provide services using those technologies in areas like GCC,
Yeah.
which we have
One
seen.
area, just all the public infrastructure, or even here metro, all that, at a particular level of growth, that will become at least reasonably some period viable. Otherwise, हमारा bank में कभी whenever we used to give, if the growth rate comes down, the level of traffic utilization, all that will come, and these loans don't get repaid at all, because the toll will be number of. So even साहब ने अभी public infrastructure is expenditure is because just to give a growth, but are they being fully utilized, sir?
It's not just utilized. I think there was this article, who wrote this, that Pratap Bhanu Mehta, that we have no idea on the investments that are happening, the capex that is happening. अरे कितना रास्ता बनाओगे मैंने that old the golden quadrilateral north south east west वो तो हो गया है यहाँ पे मैंने यहाँ पे just mindlessly making roads they at absorptive capacity and there needs to be a detailed study I mean, on this on the
आपने कोई
return on
point है?
investment.
Because rural area में कुछ link करना तो अलग है, इतना बड़ा बड़ा ये tunnel given.
5 years on a run, you can't have a 30%, the absorptive capacity of the country for, taking that infrastructure on board.
Right. Yeah, we are in time now, but maybe I have reduced your time. One word.
Yeah, no,
please.
I think just to add to it, I think, yes, I think we need to have certain different kind of infrastructure creation now. I think government is talking about creation of the smart cities or developing 100 cities. I think we need to decongest our existing tier 1 cities and, develop some of the tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think that itself is going to reap a lot of benefits.
Yes, anyhow, I know two of you question. They will be here only for some time. Please be here, 1 or 2 questions, because now the time we have to maintain, whichever earlier little got. But their viewpoints are very, very, that give a big hand, yes. इतना साहब है ना, इतना busy लोग है, और getting them on one platform and with a little divergent also. बहुत अच्छा है वो. We had points also divergence. I enjoyed the discussion. I normally yes panel है ना हम भी लेते हैं. थोड़ा हम भी I can learn from all of you. Thank you very much, and we look forward future our engagement in our NCube collaboration. We will now also start some smaller program, so that along with the bigger one, we will have the continuity of such discussion. Thank you very much, and all of you, I think you are immensely benefited, and each of their article or any research coming, try to read that. And as you go on reading, you will develop. Mr. Madan is writing always, is it in maybe business line or any other paper, his articles are all we read. And of course, you are all IRCRA or our CRISIL research reports, very well. And madam does research and some tips and other things for corporate. या चार्ज करते हैं और साहब ये ना अभी रिजर्व बैंक का पॉलिसी कमिटी में बैठ के आप सबका व्यू को उधर बात करेंगे, करेक्ट सर? गाली तो आएगा because but they are giving their independent opinion in the policy. That is a very important. That's why 3 of them, 3 sir, 3 3 external, 3 internal. So I am hopeful that you are all benefited. Thank you very much, sir. You are sparing your valuable time, and I look forward for future. Thank you.
Thank you, and let's express our gratitude to all our speakers with a warmer round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, apologies on our behalf to the speakers for extending the time in terms of your schedule. So thank you for accommodating those 15 minutes extra. We, of course, thought that when we have such dignitaries on stage, we cannot just give them 30 minutes. So the team decided at least 45 minutes would be suffice for their expertise they've brought in. So with that, we're humbly thanking all of them for joining us, and we're requesting all of you to stay back as we have our next session on the other side. We're talking about our plenary session 3, role of financial sector to make India as Viksit Bharat by 2047. In this, our moderator is going to be Pooja Bharwani, Executive Director, Deloitte South Asia. And our panelists are going to be Arun Singh, Global Chief Economist at Dun & Bradstreet. We also have Vaibhav Sharma, Co-Head Subsidiary Banking, JP Morgan Chase Bank. Aniruddha Chatterjee, MD and CEO of NSE Cogenesis, and Ravindra Singh, MD, SVC Bank. Allow us an opportunity to shortly introduce all of them as we bring them on the stage. May we request the proceedings on the stage to complete so that we can have a group photograph with all our eminent personalities and leaders on the stage. So on the other side, we have plenary session 3, role of financial sector to make India as Viksit Bharat by 2047. Allow me an opportunity to introduce all our speakers on the stage. Can we request our team to kindly join us for the group photograph, please? If you can all come towards the center. Thank you so much. And with that, a very warm thank you to all our speakers.